Welcome to the Climate and Coordination RCast, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and RChain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, RChain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey.
Okay, welcome to the newest installment of the Climate and Coordination RCast by RChain. We are very excited to be talking again today about some highly relevant, interesting, thought-provoking topics. And the first one that we have for you today is regarding some flooding, which occurred in Southern California, in Newport Beach. I'll put the link in the chat now. And this is from the Orange County Register from July 4th. Very symbolic. This headline says, "Cleanup in Newport Beach after big surf and high tides caused flooding and a sailboat to capsize." So basically what happened on July 3rd, day before July 4th, there was a huge amount of flooding in Newport Beach, which damaged a lot of homes. There are tons of pictures and videos of people trying to swim and surf and do God knows what in the actual streets of Newport Beach. And apparently they're trying to build the berm that keeps this, that keeps these high tide combination of, bigger waves with the high tide out. But this, ended up spreading a lot of trash and litter all over the place. The reason I'm talking about this is because, well, first off, it was a big piece of kind of local Southern California news, but the really concerning thing about this was that I had searched for many different sources about this a huge amount of flooding, and somehow nobody mentioned the climate crisis, climate change, sea level rise, any of that. This event seems to be regarded as just a unusually big wave combined with high tide or some kind of, singular event. And, I couldn't help but look at these videos and, there's water rushing through the streets of Newport Beach, which is not normal, way down the street. It's not just like a little bit past the beach. I mean, the water's flooding the city. And I'm just confused about how people can experience the, immediate effects of the climate crisis firsthand. It's not somewhere far off across the world. It's not a potential future threat. The streets are flooded today. That's what it is. Well, not today, but when it happened. And it's so interesting to me that I found almost no articles. I found a lot of people tweeting about the climate crisis in relation to this. But it's so funny because there's quotes in this article, for example, saying, while this low-lying coastal area is prone to flooding when a big swell and high tide mix, long-timers, which is, long-time residents say, This is the worst flooding they've seen during a summer swell in decades. So obviously, this is not a normal event for this to happen at this extent. And it's just very frustrating because I feel that we are becoming very, well adjusted to this changing world, and yet we don't even actually register as a society. What is going on? It just seems like there's a big disconnect. I would love to know if anybody else has any stories or examples of climate disasters happening around them and the public not realizing what they're living through. But I just would like to maybe just start to have a little discussion about how we can make people realize that this is happening.
Unfortunately, it's good. In my opinion, it has to get a lot worse before people will connect the dots. They're not, at this point, people are, outside of the US, people are definitely connecting the dots. But in the US, people won't connect the dots until it's ubiquitous all the time. I wish it were I wish it were another way, but it's, I don't think the U.S. mindset is organized in a way that it can connect the dots without a lot more. I mean, look at the response to COVID, right? I mean, that's indicative of the kind of mindset.
What response? Sorry. Yes, there has been somewhat of a response. Right. Obviously on the health, on the side of people actually working in hospitals, there's been a huge response. But yeah.
I mean, the meme going around, what borders on stupidity, Mexico and Canada.
Yeah, sad. It's really, really sad.
But I believe that's kind of the what we're dealing with in terms of people being willing to connect the dots.
It does really beg the question for me up here in Canada. What is it culturally that has created? I mean, we know the obvious things, but like, there are pockets in the U.S. where things seem to be better than other pockets, and I'm just trying to kind of understand why it's so bad down there for you guys.
Why? What is so bad?
The response to COVID.
Oh, yeah. Well, because I'm like, well, pick an issue. Why? What is so bad? Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of our society being pretty averse to expert opinions and science, as well as a kind of dysfunction in terms of coordination, coupled with greed, a lack of sort of value for human life. In general, in an extremely materialistic, market-driven society, and then top that off with, leadership that really doesn't commit. Like, for example, any place that you live, there's a mayor, a governor, a state government, CDC, overarching all that, federal government, and nobody seems to really agree. Like, the opinions are changing all the time, and it really seems to be kind of political triangulation about what should be happening versus just following the data and the science. To me, that seems to be a really interesting group of factors. There's probably more, though.
Well, I have a lot of faith in a person on the street, sort of the average person. But Americans they really have a kind of show me attitude. And so if it isn't like right in their faces, if it isn't like right in front of them, So that's good, because it means that it's hard for certain kinds of political scams to work, but it also means that it's much easier for other kinds of political hornswoggling to happen.
Right. And also Americans tend to, even when presented with evidence, or, even if it happens to someone that they know, like, and this is not just COVID, this is all sorts of different issues, there's sometimes a tendency to make an excuse for it and say, oh, well, there's a reason that happened, or that was a result of something else, and so, yeah, it's a very tricky kind of, and obviously there's an attitude of, American exceptionalism too, that nothing bad can ever happen to us here, and nobody can bring down the great American empire. But it's like, we're all just a bunch of human beings, just like any other country. And, we have to work together in order to deal with this. And, it's a great climate activist, Vanessa Nakate, who did a great interview in Time magazine with Angelina Jolie. And there's a tweet thanking her for doing this interview. The person said, "Thank you for fighting the invisible war." And I thought that was such a nice thing to say, because she really is fighting the invisible war. And of course, it's not invisible to people who are really paying attention. But, some people are not really paying attention as much. And this is a prime example. Huge flooding in Newport Beach. People who've lived there a long time say it's the worst they've ever seen. And there's no mention of sea level rise, no mention of climate change. People just say, well, we got to build that sand berm back up. Wow. What an sorry about 4th of July, folks. It's like, hello. So, anyway, it's pretty terrible. But I do have one more article that is also, unfortunately, not a very good news story, but luckily I know Daryl might have at least one more that we can discuss. But this is a really important piece of news that's happening, and this is from The Guardian. I guess I would categorize this equally in climate and coordination. This is from June 8th, so it's from last month. This is from The Guardian. Headline says, more masks than jellyfish, coronavirus waste ends up in the ocean. So this is a story about single-use plastic pollution during COVID. And it's not just masks that we're seeing discarded all over the planet in the streets and oceans. We're also having an uptick in, obviously, gloves, but all kinds of single-use plastic, because a lot of people are doing more takeout. A lot of things are becoming more packaged than they even were before, which is hard to do, but it's possible in America. Anything is possible. Well, and actually this is a global issue too. So, but this is a really interesting subject, because people are not really thinking about their consumption rates right now. I think people are just kind of trying to get by. And I think also there's a notion that consumption is kind of maybe going down because people don't have as much money. A lot of people are not working. People are staying at home. But actually, there's a huge amount of plastic being consumed right now. And the reason this falls under the coordination category, which I thought would be interesting, is because we need to coordinate on a way to not further pollute while we try to keep ourselves, safe, not just from the virus, but afterward. And it seems like, there's definitely a tendency to use, disposable gloves, disposable masks. I'm not sure if there's a replacement for the gloves, but definitely you can use a fabric mask, something you can wash and put it in the dryer to disinfect it or whatever. Also, people are finding, it says, bottles of hand sanitizer in the ocean. Obviously, they're empty. I would hope they're empty. But this is starting to become a serious issue. And anyway, this is a really nice article. It explains where the litter is happening. what the trend is, who discovered it, what kinds of things they're finding, the sort of overall situation with pollution in the ocean. So I think it's a really, really nice, not too long, but very informative and I think really well done piece. So I really highly recommend that anybody who's listening to this, if you want to read it, it's called More Masks Than Jellyfish, and it's from The Guardian. But anyway, I just wanted to bring this up because I don't see a lot of people talking about it anywhere on social media. The climate Twitter, which I'm an active participant of, I did not see them talking about this too much. But yeah, how can we not use COVID as an excuse to become completely, I don't know what the word is, despondent maybe, about what is happening with the planet? How can we do that?
Yeah, that's the question that the director of the World Health Organization asked this week. One of the articles that I found this week was about how the WHO chief blasts the lack of leadership and calls for global unity as coronavirus cases mount worldwide. And one of the things he says is, "My friends, make no mistake, the greatest threat we face now is not the virus itself. Rather, it's the lack of leadership and solidarity at the global and national levels." So that to me connects with climate change as well. It's to me like that's really like the big thing we have to solve. Like Greg was saying before, America will not respond until something super huge is caught on video that everyone sees. Like, to me, that's happening every week, but I guess it has to be some kind of massive, like, huge iceberg falling off the Antarctic, or I don't know, I don't know what video event would kind of create that kind of thing, but if it's something that's so spectacular, then it's too late. So we have to proactively
yes,
preempt this. And how does that happen?
Yeah, that's the frustrating part, is that exactly what you said. It's when something spectacular or whatever you just said happens, it's too late. That is so poignant. Sorry, Greg, go ahead.
No worries. I mean, again, this is why, I have focused on a coordination mechanism that sort of works in terms of, well, I mean, I hate to use the term, that's why I'm struggling, but in a fractal-like manner. So you can start with communities that get it, and then you can stitch those communities that get it into a larger community, right? That's kind of the whole idea of the architecture of RChain, is that it allows for a bubbling structure that bubbles up. And because there are lots and lots of groups out there, but they're not connected yet, and they don't have a mechanism for becoming as cohesively connected as we would like them to be. And we from the top down, what we've seen is that there can be like one event, one drop that suddenly crystallizes the solution, right? So, the George Floyd death was an example of the Americans finally sort of reaching the point where it was a super saturated solution, and that would it's no longer they can no longer accept the status quo. There are lots and lots of Americans, from Jeff Bezos to, folks who work for Goldman Sachs to folks like us, who are not happy about the response, the societal level response or the global response to climate change, and creating a network of out of these sub networks, right? Like little communities like the RChain community, or Greenpeace, or these kinds of communities. If they can then be stitched together into larger and larger communities, then we have a chance, so that when another event happens, it can kind of crystallize and mobilize a much larger group until we reach that kind of tipping point, like we've seen with the Black Lives Matter. And it takes time, but it can take a lot less time if we do the work that we're doing.
I agree. I was just thinking about the idea of fractals as I start to kind of understand last finalized state a little bit more. Thank you, Tomislav, for that awesome video on Wednesday. It kind of was so simple, and it just kind of explained the basic idea of how the poop is formed and how it gets shed. And then I think about, like, okay, so multiply that by X million billion, and you would get these patterns that one of the things that's so mind-blowing about a fractal image is when you zoom in, you see this pattern from outside, and you start to zoom in, and you start to see the same patterns within the patterns, and you keep zooming in, and that's the first time I ever saw like that kind of a fractal zoom. My head went it was like, wow, so incredible. And it's just, what's also beautiful about it is that there's no kind of one central leading thing. Like there's leaders that happen, and then those leaders kind of turn into other leaders, and then they form these beautiful patterns. And so I think I'm starting to understand a little bit better about when you're talking about that, about what we're making.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I see it in terms of these abstractions, right? But I know how to map those abstractions onto phenomena in the world, and it takes a long time. Like if you're having to start from the phenomena in the world, which is like the American citizen, who's not clued in about climate change, they're starting from the data that's right in front of them, right? While their attention is also pulled in 1,000 different directions. So to see the connections is very, very difficult. So I mean, it's the same for any kind of abstraction. I mean, one of the things that's really quite chilling, I mean, in a nice way, like I get chills, I get goose flesh, is the techniques that Tomislav used for the organization of the state. They're sort of abstractions that have been making their way into functional programming languages for a while. It's been about 15 or 20 years before they hit the mainstream developer. But those techniques are part of what's called co-algebraic or co-monadic techniques for structuring certain aspects of the evolution of state. And when you talk about fractals, one way to think about monads and comonads is monads allow you to zoom out from the fractal, right? So it sort of, because you're zoomed out, certain structures become less articulated. So certain structures become flattened, but you can still see that the shape was there. And comonads allow you to zoom in. They allow you to find articulation in the structure that you hadn't seen before. So when you talk about fractals, they're the mathematical techniques that we're using are very, very much in alignment with that, in a very specific way that allows us to do these kind of cool calculations. But furthermore, what's really interesting and very strange is that Mike and Christian and I have been focused for the last couple of weeks on comonadic structuring of calculations, because we're looking at this. We're looking to make sure that the operational semantics and logical form, that it obeys this important theorem that the by simulation we get corresponds hand in glove with the logical equivalence we get. So there's a lot of terminology, but the key point is that from a completely different direction, we were looking at these co-algebraic techniques to get very, very general results. And at the same time, sort of at the next level down of specificity, Tomislav was using co-algebraic techniques to structure the way he was managing the state for the last finalized state stuff. So these patterns, they show up everywhere. They show up at all levels of abstraction, and they're quite potent. And once you can start to see them, then once you can start to connect the dots, then more becomes possible.
Isn't a nautilus a type of fractal, or an example of a fractal?
It enjoys self-similarity, for sure. I wouldn't necessarily call it a fractal, but it certainly enjoys self-similarity.
I also wanted to know if it's operational semantics in or and logical form.
In.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically lifting the operational semantics to the logical level.
That makes sense, yeah. Well, fantastic. Daryl, I know that you had an interest in discussing Tesla today, so we could definitely discuss that if you'd like to. I think it's a very interesting subject. Everybody's been talking about it the past few weeks. Obviously, stock prices are not the only thing in life, and often, especially these days, don't really reflect what's actually going on in people's, lives. It seems like it's sort of a reality that's not only decoupled from most people's day-to-day existence, but is actually the inverse. However, I think this is a piece of good news, because obviously Tesla is building fantastic technology that is going to help the climate crisis. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'd love to, because to me, it's just kind of yet another example in the category of decarbonization is the next economy. The headline is Tesla is now worth more than Exxon Mobil. So to me, that's yet another of the many. It's almost weekly we're getting like these kind of messages from the highest levels of finance that the oil demand has peaked, and there is something else that is going to drive the economy. And so, the idea that Tesla is now worth more than ExxonMobil, to me, is more than symbolic. It's another direct example that we are on the right track from the level of our business, from the financial side of things. We are on the right track by focusing on climate solutions.
Yeah, so I read another report that said...
Fiber. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I read a couple of reports. One of them said that Tesla's now worth more than Coca-Cola, and another I saw said it's worth more than Disney, which is really crazy.
Here's the statistics here.
Oh, great.
At press time, Tesla's market capitalization, that's the economic term for basically the value of all its stock, stood at approximately 223 billion. Exxon, in contrast, was worth a little more than 187 billion. For perspective, Disney stood at 203 billion. So Tesla 223, Disney 203, Coke at 193 billion, Toyota at 204 billion, and PayPal at 209 billion. So Tesla's above all of those others in stock. Now,
must be a nice feeling for
Elon
Elon
Musk
to.
himself says that he thinks the Tesla stock is overvalued currently. But the proof is in the pudding at the moment. A company that has turned the entire auto industry on its head and is looking towards the complete solution of the baseload problem with wind and solar, coupled with storage, which is the next thing, and it looks like Tesla is poised to take that market. It's just to me, Tesla represents the next industrial revolution.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's must be nice for Elon to watch his own companies compete against each other for the top spot on the NASDAQ with, because he used to own PayPal.
Right.
Yeah, which he sold, and then that was one of the major successes of his life that allowed him to fund SpaceX, if I'm correct. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good news story. Obviously, Elon is a very colorful character in pop culture. He just became a father, I think. He's a very, I would say almost controversial person. But I think on the whole, he's doing a great thing for the humanity and for our planet. And one thing I really enjoyed learning about Tesla, I don't have one, but several of my friends do. It's very popular in Los Angeles. I learned recently that to get maintenance on your Tesla, if it's not something that they need their big machinery for, they actually come to you and fix the car in your driveway, which I think is so fascinating. Not that it's such a big deal, but I just thought that was so cool. You just call the people over and they just fix it and then they leave and that's it. Of course, why would you drive your car across town to a mechanic and be without a car when they can just come over for most repairs? So I thought that was a really interesting innovation that somehow I didn't realize that. I guess there are lots of things you realize about those cars once you own one, but
yeah, no, that's a really interesting point in that he has essentially completely redefined how cars and the car industry works. And all the other car companies are scrambling to catch up right now. And, one of the things about an electric car is that there's very, very, very many less moving parts. It's pretty kind of modular. So it's not hard to imagine that someone can just come over to your house and plop in the other part that's problematic, and off you go. The maintenance issues with electric cars are vastly less. What I think is going to happen to the auto industry is what has happened to many other industries. It's going to become a subscription model. I think that people are going to subscribe to a car and not own one. Because car companies aren't going to make money the way they've kind of made money in the past, where a lot of the money is made on the maintenance of the car. So yeah, but here's an interesting.
I might make a couple of comments here while we're on this topic. It's interesting because the car health is and the house call from the doctor, in this case the mechanic, is something that I've long thought should actually be reinstituted with respect to the health, human health.
Wow.
The benefits are enormous. if you think about it, and it goes right back to what Nora was saying about if they don't need the heavy machinery. So one of the problems with the American health system is they have all this heavy machinery that they have to justify the cost of, and so they use it unnecessarily. But if you reinstituted the house call with the doctors, it would first of all get lots of people off the streets. You have one doctor visiting many families, so that's one car or one person out there, as opposed to all of these people driving to this big, industrial complex, which is what the hospital has become. And and also it gets doctors mixing into different communities, right? So the barrios and other communities, the doctors will need them to be places that they can go, and they can also take information back about the status of these communities, right? And that's part of the isolation is that there isn't a lot of mixing of the kind of mixing that really needs to happen. So I think reinstituting the house call would be in the same way that Tesla has sort of reinstituted the house call, but for the healthcare of cars as opposed to humans, is a good thing in general.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I wanted to also say, in terms of this valuation topic, which I thought was quite interesting. Valuation is another way of connecting the dots, right? Nature doesn't conduct evaluation, right? The bees don't conduct evaluation of human stock. Only humans conduct valuation. And when you see the shift in the valuation, you're starting to see a sub-community, i.e. the financial community, begin to connect the dots. So that's something where this is what I was saying before, there are lots and lots of sub-communities within the US and other countries that are quite aware of the situation, and hence the shift in valuations of various stock. But we need to be able to help each of these sub-communities fit together into a larger whole, so that when we do have these precipitating events, they can have this amplified effect, like we saw with George Floyd. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm getting your train of thought there.
I love the quote that nature doesn't do valuation. That's a memorable one for me. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to connect the dots about sort of the trends in society and what is on the horizon. And I think it takes kind of a perceptive sort of person to look at all the enormous amount of data, coming out of existence and try to make sense of it, which is why we need a discerning mind. We need to look at the world with a discerning eye. And that's not easy for everyone to do, apparently, as history has shown us.
Of course. But also, a lot of it has to do with just, attention gets fragmented, right? You got to get your kids to school, you're worried about, various stresses in your profession or your family or all of this stuff. So there's a variety of ways in which attention is pulled. For example, right as I was trying to say, there's a variety. A dog came up to get Fiver's attention, which got my attention. So that's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. And finding ways to be able to have it. For me, it's about persistence. If I have a little window of attention here and a little window of attention there, what I was able to teach myself, there were these extremely large works that I wanted to read, tens of thousands of pages. And I just said, okay, 3 pages a day. That's what I can do. And I was able to get through these gigantic works at 3 pages a day. It took a few years, but I did it. And this is what I'm talking about, is be able to provide that glue that allows people to be, to have that persistent attention that accumulates, even if that way you don't have to depend upon these flashes of insight. I mean, it's great when they happen. We want to be prepared when they happen, but we also want to be able to oh, I've got 15 minutes here. What can I do with this 15 minutes that's moving me in the direction I want to go?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's amazing how much you can accomplish and how much you can learn if you put in like a little bit of time consistently, versus trying to conquer the mountain in one day, which is, I think, the story of RChain and the story of all of our musical lives, and the story of, lots of great successes throughout history, is to take it one step at a time. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But I think what people don't mention is you have to keep on stepping after the first one. You can't just take the first one. So there's a little caveat there.
little asterisk and some fine print.
Yeah, right. It's a continued action. And it's also, I think it's really fascinating the way that kind of action relates to time in life. Like when you are productive, whatever that means to you, time is usually on your side, but when you're not productive, somehow there's never enough time. It's very interesting to observe that in my own life.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I was just commenting on that yesterday. How I was hanging out with a friend after having gotten all of my obligations done, and the quality of my level of ease and comfort was Fiverr is protesting by laying down. She's really wants to say hi to this puppy dog.
It's a very good protest, is laying down. Very good.
Yeah,
very effective.
Very effective and playful at the same time. Anyway, just that the one principle that I have always is nothing real gets done except from a state of relaxation. And so, yeah. Okay. No, go ahead. So my observation yesterday was just like how much easier I felt during this time with my friend, when I had this space of relaxation because I know I had gotten all of my obligations done.
That is really good advice for me. I need that. Man, I've been so distracted this week because I had to upgrade my computer. And the process of upgrading my computer involved me having to kind of rebuild. I couldn't really just shift over. So it's been really distracting that way, and talk about 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. It's been so much like that this week. Man.
Well, now you're on your new system and it's working nicely. It sounds good to me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's still not totally shifted over, but making it work.
Well, I'm sure that you'll get there.
Yeah. So I mean, I really believe, and since we were talking about this, there's this sort of fractal-like connection between the personal and these larger trends. So You know,
Yes.
it's a funny way to navigate the world, but the truth is we do world traveling as much by affecting the quality of our attention as anything else. You know, by
It's sort of, I guess you could say, mental compositionality or something.
something like that. I mean, I wouldn't want to put it all in the realm of the mind unless it's, you know, mind with a capital
No,
M.
definitely not.
It's really about the quality
Yeah.
of attention. Yeah.
As always. Well, are there any final thoughts for today, or shall we finish our little discussion?
Well, this is a good note to end on, I think.
I completely agree, and I'm sad to miss Steve on this call this week. Usually he's here, and usually Ian is here, but hopefully next week they'll be back, and maybe we'll have a guest next week as well. So thank you, everybody, for listening to our Climate and Coordination RCast. Please subscribe to RChain on YouTube. There'll be lots of new content coming soon. You can join cooperative at rchain.coop. And if you'd like to be a guest, please email us at climate@rchain.coop, and we'll get back to you. So thank you all so much for participating.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Daryl.
Thanks, Nora. That's great.
Talk to you guys soon.
Okay, bye.
Ciao, ciao.